I've always been afraid of only two people. One is sitting in front of me and one is Ashok. So, he always he always makes your expectations go way beyond what your capability is. So when he invited me to be part of this panel, I said, I'm going to read a prepared speech. Is it okay? With some reluctance, he agreed. So Ashok, I'm going to read a prepared speech because in his retirement function at IIT Madras Research Park, I forgot to make a document. And so therefore this time I put together the document. Saloni, thank you. I think your book, I read every page of the 336 and very, very interesting. So thank you for that. So good evening. Some people build products, some people build companies, few build institutions, but once in a generation you meet someone who builds ecosystems. And to me, Ashok Jhunjhunwala belongs to the rare last category. So it's really a privilege to participate in the release of this Roots and Wings, a very well-researched biography by Saloni. The title is beautifully chosen. Roots represents values, wings represent imagination. And as I reflected on Ashok's life, I realized that he has spent 4 decades giving countless people both roots and values and imagination. A personal connection. My wife, Rajni Seshadri, when she was just 21, passing out from IISc, she started a professional career as a research associate at one of Ashok's lab at IIT Madras. So Bhavani and Rajni and all of us have remained very close friends for nearly 4 decades. So our association with Ashok has never been confined to conferences, committees or boardrooms. It has been a lot of our family life. So when I met Ashok, I was 28. And if we had gone to that lab in ESB 312, right? That absolutely, unimaginatively designed building in IIT Madras, ESP, it's very difficult to reach that place. I think it's, there was ideas collided with ideas, students challenging professors, and he was all of 32 at the time, just 4 years before he came back from the US. And 2 of the very close friends of ours, one passed away, Deepak Kanchandani, and the other one is Shirish Purohit. Both of them have been from the Midas Technologies, out of the 8 people who really were the first of the people whom he incubated heavily. So what is it that is, when I read Saloni's book, I kept myself asking this question: what is the operating system, to use this term, behind this extraordinary institutional build-up? And I decided that I have to really talk a little bit about that. And there are 7 phrases, all of them starting with I, just resonated in my mind. And as I was taking notes and, the first thing is infectious intensity. A lot of us work hard. A rare few create energy in everyone around them. Ashok belongs to the rare category. His intensity has always been contagious. When India struggled with rural connectivity, he did not ask, why can't somebody solve this? And that's not a question that you would ever do that. And if you read that biography, even in IIT Madras, IIT Kanpur, when he was a student, he talked about that. When imported technology dominated telecom, it shows the harder path of building the indigenous capability. When startups became fashionable, 20 years later, he had already created Tenet, nurtured Midas, and laid the foundation of India's deep tech ecosystem. I think many of you talk about it. And I want to say there was a little bit of a disappointment which converted as a fuel, which is there in the book, very well documented. He was not surprisingly selected, if I'm not mistaken, 1998 or I don't know, some 2002 or something like that, as director of IIT Madras. But for Ashok, that actually began a much larger role than if he had been confined to IIT Madras. So he converted disappointment into direction, and he really looked at what is next. And the most important thing is, he said that I have to do something very, very unique. And that's really the second part of Ashok that I really liked about, is his extraordinary intellectual independence. I mean, he's an intellect, he's intelligent, but he's also extremely independent. Because a lot of us could be categorized as independent thinkers, but Ashok builds independent institutions. And I recall that one of the things that he made very clear early on, which is there in the Articles of Association of IIT Madras Research Park, was that he said that this should not be confined by the bureaucracy of Government of India or MHRD or IIT Madras or any other government. So he actually created IIT Madras Research Park with a degree of autonomy, but well within the confines of the IIT ecosystem. And that is extraordinary. And that was at that point in time in 2006 or 7 to think about that this was needed. If today IIT Madras Research Park is a vibrant ecosystem, it is because of that intellectual independence that he chose. Okay? And he was never really, and that's really, and the whole thing is, that doesn't mean that he was not following governance. I'll talk a little bit later about that. The third thing that comes to my mind is inclusive innovation. And I think long before digital, we spoke about Digital India, Bharat, or AI for Indian languages, Ashok has already decided technology was meant to serve, not the privileged, but the underserved. One story in the book captures this beautifully. A woman from a village near Madurai visited the N-Log kiosk, and that was the earliest kiosk which converted the STD booths into a telemedicine or a teleconferencing platform long before any of that were fashionable talking about. I think this was sometime in 2000, mid-2000. She traveled, she had advanced cataract. It was diagnosed in 2005 or something like that. She traveled the next day, underwent surgery and regained the sight. Ashok was not trying to invent video conferencing. He was restoring someone's vision. And that's really, N-Log, telemedicine, Gram Teller, Desi Crew. We have Saloni here, GUI, AI for Bharat, no longer appear as very separate initiatives. They are one connected thing to serve the underserved in India. So this is something that the next one that comes to my mind is really influence. Ashok is an extraordinary influence. For a lot of people, authority comes from position, but influence comes from conviction. And Ashok has always relied on conviction to influence people. Reading Roots and Wings, I noticed that the founder after founder tell the same story. Whether it's Unifor, Ather, GUI, or TBO Tech, they all first speak about conversation and not technology. Ashok challenged them, he stretched them, he refused to let them think incrementally. He did not create followers, he created founders. And that's really, I experienced that influence personally. We were looking around sometime in 2010 or 11, we were looking around for setting up the 7th Global R&D Center of Saint-Gobain, and they've never set it up in any campus or anything like that. And Ashok convinced me and convinced my boss and convinced the panel of people who are influencing his decision in Paris to make sure that we selected IIT Madras Research Park as an institution. And I think 11 years later, after moving in 2015, we have something like 300 patents coming out of that place. If Ashok had not done that at that point in time, I don't know what we would have done. Okay, so that's really what it is. And the next lesson that I see is very informed intuition. Ashok is those classic pie-shaped intellectuals and individuals. So he's got several pillars where he's deep strength, wireless, local loop, telecom, but he also has got this ability to connect the dots. And that's really something where I call it as informed intuition. And he also solves a lot of us solve today's problem, but he really solves problems which you'll think are very important in the future. So whether it's rural connectivity, research park, deep tech, AI for Indian language, or electric mobility, which started way back in 2013 with Ather, Ashok has had an extraordinary habit of arriving almost a decade ahead of others. And that's not luck. That's an intuition built upon deep knowledge, relentless curiosity, and an extraordinary ability to connect seemingly unrelated things. That continues right through the year. I've experienced it several times, and I think especially 5 years ago when he brought all of us together, I think one of the fellow directors are here also. I think he talked about his 10x ideas, and that's really, in every one of those 10x ideas, many of them are at least decade ahead of time. The sixth lesson is integrity of purpose. So I think Ashok's integrity is just much more than honesty. What impressed me deeply is his conscious decision not to personally benefit from any one of the companies and institutions that he helped to nurture. Just remember that the IIT Madras incubation has created companies whose value would be much more than 60,000 crores today. And other than IIT Madras Incubation Center, which has a token participation in that, none of this had benefited him individually. That's really integrity, because he was always looking at beyond personal wealth at national capability. And I remember this very interestingly. We had this discussion on how to structure the contract between IIT Madras Research Park and Saint-Gobain. And I was sitting on both fences, because I was on both sides of the fences. And I was with IIT Madras Research Park as a board member. I was also in the board of Saint-Gobain. I just kept back because I said that this is difficult. And you know how multinationals can be. We can be very finicky about clauses because we don't know. I think we have the present CEO of the IIT Madras Research Park here, Nat. I think we were looking at this, and I remember that we were in, I don't know whether Ashok remembers that, we were in, he came all the way to meet us at Fisherman's Cove. And he just said that, okay, whatever you want, I will do this. And he did a win-win, and it proved to be phenomenally good for us, because, and also good for the IIT Madras Research Park, because the seed money that Saint-Gobain gave made it easier for, I'm not saying that was the only important reason, made it easier for the phase 2 to start with. But I thought this negotiation was over, but that is when the negotiation began. When the building began to take shape, you know what, the forever Marwadi that is in him called us and said that now I want advanced glazing, acoustic solutions from you, give me your cost price. Okay? And if you're willing to do it even without cost price, they'll be happy as a CSR. And that's really Ashok for you. He's a tough negotiator, and someone who's an extraordinarily. So for me, I think the last one is something which most people who have been part of the Ashok's extended circle of founders and teams in both IIT Madras Research Park, now at ITEL, I think his extraordinary impatience with inertia. I think Ashok is not impatient with people. I think sometimes we miss that because he yells at people all over the place in the corridors in ESB or anywhere else. I think if you had ever been there, you would just wonder, how can anyone put up with this? I'm sure that Bhavani, you are the only one who's not in the circle of being yelled at. Okay, Ashok is not impatient with people. He's impatient with wasted potential. He's impatient with bureaucracy. He's impatient with mediocrity, comfortable mediocrity. And working with him, occasionally it has been exhausting. It can be. But just when you think you've solved one problem, you already moved on to the next 3 and the next 10 after that. So that's how it is. That's how Ike is. So for me, I think what he taught me was the greatest waste in life is not failure. It's really unrealized potential. So when I look at what Ashok has done over the last thing, I'll conclude on a personal note. Ashok, over the last 4 decades, you have never been merely a professor, a technologist, or an entrepreneur to me. You've been a compass helping us find direction. I think this is covered beautifully in the book. You've been a critic, refusing to let us waffle in mediocrity. And perhaps more importantly, you've been a co-conspirator in many great technologies and ideas take fruition in India. Whenever someone brought you an idea that could strengthen India, your first question was never, whose idea is it? It was always, how do we make it happen? How do we execute? That generosity of spirit has inspired generations of entrepreneurs, researchers, industrialists, and public servants. If Roots and Wings inspires even a few more young Indians to build institutions rather than merely careers, ecosystems rather than merely enterprises, platforms upon which others can succeed, then Ashok's greatest ecosystem may still lie ahead of us. Thank you.